I've been putting this off for 6 years. Not because I'm afraid someone will find me. I don't think it works that way. I'm putting it off because saying it means admitting I understand what happened, and I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure understanding is even possible when what you're describing is something that was in the process of becoming, something unfinished, something that was studying the shape of a life the way a student studies a language, sound by sound, gesture by gesture, until fluency arrives and the accent disappears, and no one can tell you weren't born speaking it. I'm going to tell you what I was, where I worked, and what I found. Then I'm going to tell you what it cost me. And then you can decide for yourself whether anything I say matters. My name is Joel Brannick. In the spring of 2015, I was 26 years old and working as a wildlife biologist for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The job wasn't glamorous. Mostly, it meant driving to remote monitoring stations, downloading data from trail cameras, checking water samples, filing reports that no one read. I had a territory that covered a wide belt of national forests south of the Cascades, old growth, dense canopy, the kind of terrain that swallowed sound and gave nothing back. There were 8 monitoring stations across my territory. 7 of them were standard setups: a weatherproof lockbox bolted to a platform, a solar panel, a camera on a tree mount. You drove in on a fire road, hiked maybe a mile, swapped the SD card, checked the equipment, and drove back. Took 2 hours, tops. Station 8 was different. Station 8 sat at the end of a decommissioned logging road 14 miles from the nearest paved surface. The road itself had been abandoned sometime in the 80s. You could still drive it if you had clearance and a truck that could handle washouts, but the forest had been taking it back for decades, alders growing through the gravel bed, root systems buckling the shoulders. The canopy closed over it in places so completely that your headlights were the only illumination at 2 in the afternoon. The station itself was a small cabin, not a lookout tower, not a platform, an actual structure with 4 walls, a roof, a door with a deadbolt. It had been built in the 70s as a seasonal research post for a long-defunct salmon spawning study. When I inherited the territory from my predecessor, a man named Dale Morrow, who had taken early retirement without explanation, the cabin had already been repurposed as an equipment hub. Trail cameras, acoustic monitors, a small weather station on the roof, more sensors than the other 7 stations combined, pointed at less forest. I asked my supervisor, Carla Voss, why Station 8 had so much hardware concentrated in one drainage. She said it was a biodiversity hotspot. She said the old growth there was uniquely intact. She said the acoustic data was valuable for a bat population study being run out of Oregon State University. All of that was true. I checked. There were real studies, real data requests, real justifications for every piece of equipment bolted to every tree, but none of it explained the binder. The binder was sitting on the desk inside the cabin when I made my first visit to Station 8 in March of 2015. Dale had left it there, or someone before Dale had. It was a standard 3-ring binder, dark green, with a typed label on the spine that read Station 8, Operating Protocol. I expected maintenance schedules, equipment manuals, emergency contact numbers. What I found instead was 53 pages of behavioral instructions. Not for me. The first page was a cover sheet. It read, Subject Monitoring and Behavioral Framework, Active Period. March through November, revised 2009. Below that, in smaller type, this protocol governs observation, documentation, and non-interference procedures for the Station 8 subject. All personnel assigned to this station are required to read, and initial each section before beginning fieldwork in the coverage area. I turned the page. It was a list of rules, written in flat, bureaucratic language, the kind you'd find in any government operations manual, but the content was unlike anything I'd encountered in 6 years of fieldwork. Rule 1 stated that the subject was to be monitored remotely at all times during the active period. No direct visual observation was to be attempted within 200 meters of the subject's last known position. Rule 4 stated that if the subject was observed engaging in acquisitive mimicry, their term, the observer was to cease recording, leave the immediate area, and file an incident report with the regional coordinator within 24 hours. Rule 7 stated that physical materials left at the station by the subject were not to be handled, removed, or photographed. They were to be noted in the station log and left undisturbed. Rule 11 stated that the subject's vocalizations were not to be responded to under any circumstances, including vocalizations that appeared to originate from known individuals. Rule 15 stated that if trail cameras captured images showing the subject in close proximity to a non-affiliated human, the images were to be classified and forwarded immediately rather than stored locally. Rule 19 stated that if the subject achieved convergence, again, their term, not defined anywhere in the document, all monitoring was to be suspended and the station was to be vacated for a minimum of 90 days. There were 53 pages of this. I sat in that cabin for 2 hours, reading it all. The light through the single window shifted from gray to nearly nothing as clouds thickened overhead. The trees outside pressed close against the walls. I could hear them groaning faintly in a wind I couldn't feel. And when I finished, I felt something I couldn't name. Not fear exactly, but a deep wrongness. Like I'd read the operating manual for a situation that couldn't exist, written by people who believed completely that it did. I drove back to town that evening and called Dale Morrow. His number was still in the department directory. He answered on the 6th ring. "Dale, it's Joel Brannick. I took over your territory." Silence, then flat. "Which station?" It wasn't a question. 8, I said. "Did you read it?" "Yes." "Then you know what you need to know." "Dale, I don't know anything. What is this? What subject?" "There's nothing in the system about a monitored subject at that location. There's no study number, no principal investigator, no—" "It's not in the system," he said. "It won't be. Don't look for it there." "Then what am I supposed to do with this?" He was quiet for a long time. I could hear something in the background, a television turned low, or a radio. "How many years you plan to work that territory?" he asked. "I don't know. A few, at least." "Then follow the protocol. Don't skip visits. Don't go at night. Download the cameras on schedule. And when you find images that don't make sense, you file them with Carla and you don't think about them afterward." "Dale." "I did it for 9 years, he said. 9 years and I followed every rule and nothing happened to me. That's the only thing I can tell you that matters." He hung up. I want to tell you that I marched into Carla's office the next morning and demanded answers, that I was brave or principled, or at least professionally curious enough to push hard. But I didn't do any of that. I put the binder back on the desk at Station 8, and I followed the maintenance schedule, and I downloaded the camera data every 2 weeks. And for the first 4 months, I told myself it was an elaborate hazing ritual, something Dale had bought into. Because he was isolated and odd, he'd always been a little odd, people said, and something I was too rational to take seriously. Then summer came, and the cameras started catching things. The first image that stopped me was from June 14th. Camera 6 mounted on a Douglas fir about 300 meters northeast of the cabin, facing a game trail along a seasonal creek. The image showed something standing at the edge of the trail, partially obscured by sword fern. It was shaped like a person. The proportions were close to right. It appeared to be naked. The skin was pale, grayish, uniform in tone, like something that had never been exposed to direct sunlight. It was standing with its arms pressed flat against its sides, its head tilted approximately 15 degrees to the left. Stiff, motionless, like a mannequin placed there by someone who understood the concept of standing, but hadn't yet mastered the subtleties of weight distribution. The trail camera was motion activated and took 3 photos in rapid succession when triggered. In the first image, the figure was at the trail's edge. In the second, taken 1.5 seconds later, it was 6 feet closer to the camera. In the third, 1.5 seconds after that, it was gone. No blur, no transitional motion captured. It was there, and then closer, and then not there. I stared at those images on my laptop in my apartment in Roseburg for a very long time. The rational part of my mind offered explanations: a hiker, an exposure artifact, an animal misidentified by poor resolution and bad light. But the shape was human. The posture was wrong in a specific way that didn't match any natural explanation. And the movement 6 feet in 1.5 seconds with no blur, that wasn't walking. I filed the images with Carla using the incident report template from the binder. She replied the next morning with a single line: received and logged. Continue standard monitoring schedule. That was it. No questions, no follow-up, no concern. I want to say I was shocked, but by then I had already started to understand something about Station 8. It wasn't secret exactly, it wasn't hidden, it was unacknowledged. It existed in a space between official and unofficial, between documented and denied. The equipment was real, budgeted, maintained. The data went somewhere. Reports were filed and received. But no one talked about it. No one named it. No one asked what the subject was, or where it came from, or what it wanted. The silence around it was total, and I learned to live inside that silence. I downloaded cameras every 2 weeks through that first summer. Most of the time, there was nothing unusual. Deer, elk, the occasional black bear, a bobcat once. But every few weeks, there would be another image. Sometimes 2 or 3 on the same SD card. The figure in the creek drainage, standing in water up to its ankles, head tilted. The figure on the old logging road, 70 meters from where I'd parked my truck. The figure behind a big leaf maple with only one arm visible, the hand pressed flat against the bark, as though feeling for something through the wood. Each time, the same gray skin, the same stiff posture, the same direct, unsettling awareness of where the camera was. And then, in August, the figure was wearing clothes. That's what the binder called acquisitive mimicry. Section 3, subsection 2. The subject may begin incorporating observed elements into its physical presentation. This can include clothing, posture, gait patterns, and facial approximation. This behavior indicates active observation of human subjects and should be treated as an escalation indicator. The clothes were wrong. In the image from August 9th, the figure was wearing what appeared to be a green canvas jacket, similar to my field jacket, the same style issued to ODFW staff. But it was on backwards. The zipper ran down the spine, the collar pressed against the chest. The figure's head was tilted at the same 15-degree angle, and its face, this was the first clear facial image, was smooth, not featureless exactly, more like unfinished, like a sculpture that someone had started but abandoned before adding the fine detail. The suggestion of a brow, the beginning of a nose, two slight depressions where eyes should be, but without depth, without iris or pupil or white. I filed the report. Carla acknowledged it. And I stopped sleeping through the night. I want to be clear about something. This is not a story about a man who went looking for trouble. I didn't want to understand what the subject was. I didn't need to understand it. What I needed was for it to stay behind the cameras, inside the protocol, contained by the rules that some unknown, careful, probably terrified person had written decades before I arrived. For 2 years, that worked. I followed every rule. I never visited at night. I never stayed at the cabin longer than 4 hours. I never responded to sounds I sometimes heard in the drainage that sounded like my own name called from a distance, or like my truck's horn, or just once, like a woman crying somewhere in the tree line. I filed my reports. I maintained my distance. I was a competent keeper of someone else's system. The system broke in 2017. That September, I drove out to Station 8 for a routine camera download. A Wednesday, mid-morning, overcast but dry. The road was worse than usual. A culvert had failed during the previous winter, and the washout had taken a 10-foot section down to bare clay. I parked my truck a mile farther back than normal and hiked in on foot. I reached the cabin around 11. Everything looked normal from outside. Door locked, solar panel intact, no visible damage. I unlocked the deadbolt and stepped inside. The binder was open on the desk. I always left it closed. Always. It was a small ritual. A way of maintaining order in a situation that had no order. Close the binder, lock the door, walk away. The binder was open to page 41, section 7, convergence criteria. I'd read that section before, multiple times. It described a set of conditions under which the subject would be considered to have achieved full behavioral convergence with a human template. The language was clinical, dispassionate, consistent adoption of human posture across multiple observations, sustained facial coherence, demonstrated use of human vocalizations in contextually appropriate patterns, and finally the criterion that had always bothered me most: voluntary approach toward a human subject without triggering a flight response in the observed human. That last criterion, it implied that convergence wasn't just about what the subject could do, it was about what it could make others feel, or rather, what it could prevent others from feeling. The goal wasn't to look human. The goal was to make looking at it feel normal. Someone had written in the margin of page 41, fresh ink, blue ballpoint. The handwriting was small and neat, and I did not recognize it. It said, almost. I left the cabin immediately, locked the door, hiked back to my truck too fast for the terrain, stumbling over roots and washout debris in the dim light. Drove out. That night at home, I tried calling Dale. The number had been disconnected. I tried Carla's cell. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail describing what I'd found: the binder open, the handwriting, the word almost. She called back the next morning. "Don't go back for 60 days, she said. Her voice was calm, procedural. "What's happening?" "We're pausing your schedule at Station 8, 60 days minimum. I'll notify you when to resume." "Carla, someone was inside the cabin. Someone opened the binder and wrote in it. That means someone has a key or the lock." "I understand your concern. 60 days. Focus on your other stations." "Was it a person who wrote that?" She paused. The phone line hummed faintly. "Focus on your other stations, Joel." I obeyed. For 60 days I ran my other routes, filed my other data, told myself that whatever was happening at Station 8 was being handled by someone above me in a chain I couldn't see. I didn't drive the logging road. I didn't think about the word almost. I didn't think about what it meant for something that was not human to hold a pen, to form letters, to write in English, to understand what almost meant in the context of its own becoming. I mostly succeeded at not thinking about those things. Mostly. On day 61, Carla sent an email. A single sentence. You may resume standard schedule at Station 8, effective immediately. I drove out the following Monday morning. The road had deteriorated further. More erosion, more alder encroachment. I parked even farther back than before. The hike took 40 minutes through wet silence. When I reached the clearing where the cabin stood, the door was open. Not forced, not damaged. The lock was intact, the frame unsplintered. The door was simply standing open about a foot, as though someone had turned the deadbolt with a key and pushed and walked away without pulling it shut behind them. I stood at the tree line for a long time. The forest was still. The only sound was a Steller's jay behind me somewhere, calling in its harsh, mechanical rhythm. From where I stood, I could see inside the desk, the chair, the equipment rack against the far wall. Everything appeared to be in order. The binder was closed. I went inside. I checked the equipment. I downloaded the cameras. Everything was routine. Every SD card was clean, 60 days of images showing deer, elk, a coyote pair, nothing else. No subject, not a single capture. I should have felt relieved. Instead, the absence felt deliberate, like a held breath, like something choosing not to be seen. I closed the door when I left, locked it, checked the lock twice. 2 weeks later, I returned. Door locked, everything normal, cameras clean. And again after that, and again. For 3 months straight, October, November, December, there was nothing. No captures, no sounds, no evidence that anything unusual had ever been in that drainage. Then, in January of 2018, a hiker went missing. His name was Marcus Devereaux. 34, experienced backpacker, solo winter trip along a ridge trail 8 miles south of Station 8. He'd filed a trip plan with the Forest Service Ranger Station in Tiller, expected out on a Saturday. By Monday, he hadn't appeared. Search and rescue mobilized Tuesday. I wasn't part of the search that was Forest Service jurisdiction, not fish and wildlife, but I knew the terrain. I'd walked some of those connecting trails while checking camera positions. When a deputy from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office called to ask if I'd noticed anything unusual in the area, I said no. For 3 months I'd seen nothing at all. That was technically true. They found Marcus's tent on the 4th day of searching, set up correctly in a cleared area off the ridge trail. His gear was inside. His sleeping bag was laid out. His food bag was properly hung from a bear wire. His boots sat side by side at the tent's entrance. His phone was there, battery dead. His wallet, his car keys, his water bottle, half full. Everything was there except Marcus. It looked like he'd stepped barefoot out of his tent in the middle of the night and walked into the forest and simply not come back. They searched for 9 more days. Ground teams, helicopter, tracking dogs. I heard later from someone in the sheriff's office that the dogs had behaved strangely, circling the tent site repeatedly, whining, refusing to commit to a scent trail in any consistent direction. They tracked briefly downhill toward the creek drainage, toward my drainage, toward Station 8, then broke off and returned to the handlers, distressed. They found no body, no clothing, no blood, no trace of Marcus Devereaux beyond that campsite. I knew. I didn't know for certain, but I knew. 2 weeks after the search was called off, I went out to download cameras on my regular schedule. I worked through stations 1 through 7 without incident. Then I drove the logging road to Station 8. Camera 4 covered a section of game trail about 2.3 miles from where Marcus's tent had been found. When I pulled the SD card and loaded it on my laptop in the cabin, there was a single image that hadn't been there on my previous download. The figure was standing in the center of the trail, facing the camera directly, not at the edge of the frame, not partially obscured. Dead center, squared up to the lens as though posing. It was wearing hiking boots, heavy-soled, dark brown, the laces tied properly. It was wearing dark blue hiking pants with a cargo pocket on the left thigh. It was wearing a blue fleece pullover with a quarter zip at the collar, and its face, I need to be careful here, because I know how this sounds. Its face was nearly right. The bone structure was there, forehead, cheekbones, jaw. The eyes were present now, dark, properly placed, with whites and irises visible. The nose was proportional. The mouth was shaped correctly. But the expression was wrong, not blank, not menacing. The expression on that face was eager, delighted even, the way a child looks when they've finished something difficult and want someone to notice. It was smiling lips pulled back, teeth showing. The muscles around the eyes contracted in what should have been warmth, but wasn't. It was showing me what it had made. I filed the report. Carla acknowledged receipt within the hour, faster than she'd ever responded before. I didn't ask about Marcus Devereaux. I didn't ask if anyone else was connecting a missing hiker to the Station 8 coverage area. I didn't ask because I already understood. No one was connecting anything to anything. That was how the system functioned. Clean compartments, careful silence. No single person held the whole picture, except me, and Dale before me, and whoever came before Dale. That spring and summer, 2018, the cameras caught the subject 11 times between March and May. Each capture showed progression. The face refined, the posture loosened, became more natural. The clothing changed no longer backwards or misarranged, but worn correctly, casually, the way someone wears clothes they've owned for years. In one image from mid-April, the subject was walking along the old logging road with a gait I can only describe as practiced. Heel-toe, arms swinging in natural counterbalance, head level, shoulders relaxed. It looked like a man going for a walk. It looked like a colleague. It looked like me. But in every image where the face was clear enough, the eyes were focused directly on the camera lens, not near the camera, not in the general direction, dead center on the lens, as though it knew where every camera was mounted, as though it had been watching me hang them. I should have quit. I know that now, and I knew it then. A reasonable person would have walked into Carla's office and said, "I'm done. I'm not going back. Find someone else." But I had a salary and benefits and a pension accruing and student loans and a truck payment and a life that required this specific job to continue. And what would I have said? That there was something in the woods learning to be human, that my own department knew about it and had written procedures for it, and that no one seemed alarmed. How do you quit a job because of something that, on paper, is just wildlife monitoring? How do you explain that to a landlord, a bank, a future employer? I stayed. In July of 2018, I met Abigail Ostrowski. She was a botanist with the Forest Service, doing a summer survey of mycorrhizal networks in old-growth Douglas fir stands. Her study area overlapped with my territory in several places. We met at a trailhead parking lot on a Thursday morning, both loading gear into our trucks, making small talk about road conditions and trail closures. The kind of conversation you have 100 times in fieldwork without it meaning anything. But she was smart and specific, and she had a dry, observational humor that caught me off guard. She was 31, divorced, no children. She lived alone in a rental house in Glide. We started seeing each other in August. By October, she was staying at my apartment in Roseburg most weekends. I didn't tell her about Station 8, not the truth of it. I told her I had a remote monitoring post that was difficult to access, that the road was deteriorating, that I didn't enjoy the long solo hikes. All true, but I didn't mention the binder or the subject or the eager smile on a face wearing Marcus Devereaux's features. I thought I was protecting her. I think now I was protecting the one part of my life that felt untouched by it, the part that belonged to me rather than to the protocol. Then Abby's study area shifted. In March of 2019, her plots got reassigned. Budget restructuring, new research priorities, the kind of bureaucratic reshuffling that happens constantly in federal land management and means nothing to anyone except the people whose daily lives it rearranges. Her new survey plots were in the drainage south of Station 8. 3 of them fell within a mile of my camera network. I tried to prevent it. I called her supervisor, Hank Pulaski, at the Tiller Ranger Station and told him the terrain was unstable, that there had been significant washouts, that access was difficult and potentially unsafe. All true, none of it the actual reason. Hank said he appreciated the heads up, but that Abby was experienced and the plot locations had already been approved at the district level. Nothing he could do. I went to Carla next, told her another researcher was going to be working near Station 8 and asked if that presented any concerns under the monitoring protocol. Is she going to be near the cabin itself? Carla asked. No. But within the camera coverage area, easily. Has the subject been active recently? Last capture was early May, nothing since. Then there's no conflict under current parameters. Maintain your standard schedule. If activity resumes, we'll reassess. But Carla, if she's out there alone and the subject is Joel, her voice was patient in a way that felt rehearsed. The protocol accounts for incidental human presence in the coverage area. It's been happening for decades. Hikers, hunters, researchers, the parameters are designed around it. There's nothing to do here except continue your work. That was the last conversation I had with Carla that felt like it was between 2 colleagues operating in the same reality. After that, everything she said felt like it had a second sentence beneath it, one she'd decided long ago never to speak. Abby started fieldwork on her new plots in April 2019. She went out twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, hiking in from a different access point than mine, working through the study area with her soil cores and root samples and waterproof notebooks. She was methodical and observant and very good at her job, and she was alone out there in the same drainage where something was learning to walk like a man. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. Abby came home tired and satisfied, full of observations about high-fall networks and soil moisture gradients and canopy light penetration. I listened and asked questions and pretended the forest she was describing was just a forest. On a Thursday in late April, she came back looking distracted, not scared, thoughtful. She was quiet through dinner. Afterwards, sitting on the couch with her field boots still on, she said, "Do you ever see other people out near your station?" My hands went cold. What do you mean? I saw someone today, on that old decommissioned road, the one that runs along the ridge north of my plots. Just walking. A man, I think, pretty far away. Did he see you? She looked at me oddly. I don't know. He was just walking. It struck me because there's no reason for anyone to be out there. No trailhead access, no maintained route. What did he look like? Couldn't tell much. He was wearing a green jacket like yours, actually. Dark pants, normal build. He was walking normally, just there was something about it, like he was concentrating on it, like walking required his full attention. I asked her to show me on a map. She pointed to a spot on the decommissioned logging road, roughly 400 meters from camera 6. Did he approach you? I asked. Did he come any closer? No, he just kept walking. Joel, why do you keep asking? There have been some trespassing issues in that section. Illegal camping, probably. If you see anyone out there again, don't engage. Don't wave. Just head back toward your vehicle. She said, okay. She studied my face for a long moment. I could see her deciding whether to push, and then she let it go. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside her in the dark, and I thought about the binder's definition of convergence, the final criterion, voluntary approach without triggering flight response. The subject wasn't just trying to look human. It was trying to feel human to be near, trying to occupy a space beside someone without the air going wrong, without the instinct kicking in, without the ancient mammalian alarm sounding in someone's nervous system, and Abby had seen it walking, and she'd felt nothing but mild curiosity. 3 days later, a Sunday, off schedule, I drove to Station 8 alone. I skipped the cabin and went straight to camera 6, pulled the SD card, loaded it on my field laptop right there, crouched beside the tree with the ferns pressing wet against my legs. 4 images from Thursday, the day Abby was out there. Image 1, the old logging road, empty. Image 2, 18 minutes later, the subject at the far edge of the frame. Green jacket ODFW issue, identical to the one in my closet at home. It was facing away from the camera, looking down the road in the direction of Abby's study plots. Image 3, 22 minutes after that. The subject, 10 meters closer to the camera, still facing away. Its posture was relaxed, natural. It had its hands in the jacket pockets. If I'd seen this image without context, I would have said it was a coworker, a fellow field tech, someone who had every reason to be there. Image 4, 31 minutes later. The road was empty. I sat on the forest floor beside that camera for a long time. The trees dripped. The light was gray and diffuse, and the silence was the particular silence of old growth, where the canopy absorbs everything. I understood something then that I'd been refusing to understand for 4 years. The subject was not just learning to look human. It was learning to be near humans, to pass, to occupy proximity without consequence. And it was practicing in the one place where a figure shaped like a wildlife worker in a green jacket would be unremarkable, where it would make contextual sense, where it could be seen and dismissed. It was learning to be me. Not my face, specifically, not my body or my voice, but my context, the shape that belonged in this landscape. The figure that someone working nearby would see from a distance and wave at and think nothing of and continue with their day. And Abby had already almost waved at it. I drove home. I told her she needed to get out of that study area. I said it wasn't safe. I said there was something out there I couldn't fully explain, but that she needed to trust me. She asked what I meant. She was patient. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, and I told her all of it. The binder, the protocol, the subject, the cameras. Marcus Devereaux and his boots. The thing in the green jacket. The word almost. 4 years of silence broken in 40 minutes of desperate, stumbling explanation. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, She looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't fear. It wasn't disbelief exactly. It was concern, but directed at me, focused entirely on me. "Joel," she said carefully, "I think you need to talk to someone. I'm talking to you. I mean a professional. The isolation, the solo fieldwork, the long drives, I think it's been harder on you than you realize. Abby, I have photos. I can show you the images right now." "Okay, show me." I pulled up the camera captures on my laptop. The figure on the road, the green jacket, the face from the February 2018 captured the eager smile, the almost right features. Abby looked at each image carefully. She took her time, and then she said gently, "Joel, this could be anyone, a hiker, someone from another agency. The resolution is terrible, you can barely make out any detail. And this one," she pointed at the smiling face, "this just looks like a guy. Kind of a weird angle, bad lighting, but it's just a person." She was right that the images were low resolution. Trail cameras aren't designed for identification. They're built for detection, presence or absence, species confirmation. At that quality, in that light, the subject looked like exactly what it was trying to look like. A person. Just a person. "The binder," I said. "Come with me. I'll take you to the cabin and you can read it yourself." She agreed, maybe to humor me, maybe because she could see how much it mattered. We drove out the following Tuesday, together, in my truck. Broad daylight, clear weather. I parked at my usual spot and we hiked in together, 40 minutes through the tall, silent trees. I told her about each camera as we passed its position. I pointed out the game trails. She asked careful, specific questions, the way she always did. When we reached the cabin, the door was locked. I opened it with my key. The binder was gone. The desk was empty. The equipment rack was intact. Cameras downloading normally. Batteries charged. But the space where the binder had sat for 4 years, for decades before I arrived, was bare. There was a faint rectangle of lighter-colored wood on the desk surface, where the binder's footprint had protected it from dust and UV discoloration. It had been there. That rectangle proved it had been there, but it was not there now. Abby looked at the desk. She looked at me. I could see her trying to be kind. "Maybe someone from your office picked it up," she offered. "A maintenance visit, or no one comes out here but me. That's the entire point." "Joel." I searched the cabin. Every drawer, the storage crate under the cot, the shelf above the equipment rack, behind the rack itself. Nothing. The binder had been removed as cleanly as if it had never existed. We drove home mostly in silence. That night, Abby slept at her own place for the first time in weeks. The next morning she texted, "I think we need some space. I love you, but I'm really worried about you. Please talk to someone." I didn't argue. From her perspective, I had shown her blurry photos of a hiker, an empty desk, and a story about a monster in the woods learning to be human. From her perspective, I was a man alone too long with his own paranoia. I couldn't even blame her. I called Carla that afternoon. "The protocol binder is gone from Station 8, I said. "What binder?" The floor dropped. "The operating protocol, the behavioral framework document, 53 pages, subject monitoring procedures, the binder that's been on that desk since before Dale Morrow." "Joel, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Station 8 is a standard wildlife monitoring post. If a previous technician left personal materials at the station, they may have been removed during a routine infrastructure audit. I can look into it." "Carla, you've been receiving my incident reports for 4 years. Every 2 weeks, the subject captures, the acquisitive mimicry reports. You acknowledged every single one. Silence. A long, deliberate silence. Then, I receive and file all field reports submitted by staff. Some are flagged for secondary review. I'm not certain which specific reports you're referencing off the top of my head, but I can pull your submission record if you'd like to schedule a meeting to... Stop, I said. Just stop. She waited. What is happening? I asked. And I meant it as broadly as it sounded, not just what was happening to the binder or the reports, what was happening to the edges of my reality. What was happening to the evidence of what I'd been doing for 4 years? Nothing is happening, Joel. You're a valued member of the team doing demanding work in remote conditions. If you're experiencing stress or isolation related, I hung up. I sat in my apartment for the rest of that day, and I thought about what was being done, not by the subject, by the system around it. The binder had prepared me. It had kept me safe, kept me at distance, given me rules, made the situation manageable. And now the binder was gone. The reports were being denied. My supervisor was pretending ignorance, and I was alone with knowledge that no one would corroborate. And then the thought came, quiet and terrible. The binder was removed because it was no longer needed. The monitoring phase was over. The subject had moved past the point where protocols and distance parameters served any purpose. It had learned enough. It was ready to leave the forest. I went back one more time, a Friday in June 2019, alone. I drove the bad road and parked and hiked past the cabin without stopping and went to the section of logging road where camera 6 covered the trail. I sat down on a moss-covered nurse log and I waited. I'm not entirely sure what I expected. An encounter, maybe. Something that would make it real in a way that couldn't be denied, couldn't be erased, couldn't be explained away by resolution or lighting, or the comforting fiction that everything in the woods is just a person. I waited 3 hours. The forest offered nothing, no figure, no sound that shouldn't have been there. The light moved through the canopy in slow columns. A varied thrush called somewhere distant. I was alone. When I stood to leave, my legs stiff, I noticed something across the road. A big leaf maple, old, wide-trunked, moss-covered, and on that trunk, at roughly chest height, there was a fresh blaze, a triangular cut in the bark, white wood exposed, not yet oxidized, the kind of mark someone makes with a hatchet to flag a route. I crossed the road and looked at it, fresh, days old at most. And at the base of the tree, in the soft earth where rain had recently loosened the soil, there was a single boot print, clear and deep. A hiking boot lug sole, good tread pattern, size 11. I looked down at my own feet. Same boots, same size, same tread. The print was identical. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, staring at that print, and then I walked back to my truck and drove out and did not return. I submitted my resignation to ODFW in September 2019. Burnout, I told them. The paperwork processed in 3 days, faster than any administrative action I'd ever seen in that office. No exit interview, no questions about ongoing projects, no concern about continuity at my stations. They let me go as though they'd been waiting. I moved to Medford, got a job at a plant nursery wholesale stock, nothing that required solitude or forests or long drives on empty roads. I didn't look at trail cameras, didn't check my old email, didn't think about Station 8. I grew tomatoes and raised beds and went to sleep at 9 and slowly tried to build a self that had no connection to any of it. For a year, it almost worked. In October 2020, I saw Marcus Devereaux. Not a photo, not a news article. Marcus Devereaux, in person, walking through the parking lot of a Fred Meyer grocery store in Medford on a Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. He looked exactly like his missing person photograph. Same build, 5'11", medium frame, same close-cropped dark hair, same complexion. He was wearing jeans and a gray crewneck sweatshirt. He was carrying a paper grocery bag. He walked to a car, a silver Honda Civic. Oregon plates set the bag in the back seat, got in, and drove away. I stood in the parking lot with my truck keys in my hand for what felt like several minutes. The world kept going around me. Carts rattled. An employee collected baskets from the corral. A woman walked past me talking on her phone. Normal afternoon, normal parking lot, normal everything. Marcus Devereaux had been missing for 2 years and 9 months. His case was still open, and here he was, buying groceries in Southern Oregon. Except Marcus Devereaux went missing in January 2018, and in February 2018, the subject had been wearing his boots and his jacket, and its face had been almost right, and it had been smiling. I went home. I found the missing persons page for Marcus Devereaux on the National Missing and Unidentified Persons database. The photo was the same man, same face, same hairline, same slightly asymmetrical jaw. The man in the parking lot. I found a white pages listing for a Marcus Devereaux in Medford, a street address, a phone number. I drove to the address the next morning. A small ranch house on a quiet residential street, lawn trimmed, hedges maintained, the silver Civic in the driveway. It looked like every other house on the block, normal, settled, unremarkable. I parked across the street and I sat there for an hour. Nothing happened. The house was still, curtains drawn, no activity. Then, at 11:47 a.m., the front door opened. Marcus Devereaux stepped onto the porch. He was wearing different clothes than the day before: khaki pants, a blue button-down shirt. He walked to the mailbox at the curb, opened it, pulled out a handful of envelopes, flipped through them casually: bills, ads, the normal daily mail of a normal person living a normal life. Then he looked up, across the street, directly at me through the windshield of my truck. And he smiled. It was the same smile, the same eager, completed something smile from the trail camera image 2 years prior. The face was perfect, now no longer almost right, but entirely right. Indistinguishable from the photographs of a man who'd walked barefoot out of a tent on a winter night and never come back. But the smile was wrong in the same way it had always been wrong. Too complete, too satisfied, too aware of being observed. He held my gaze for perhaps 3 seconds. Then he turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. I drove home. I didn't sleep that night. I don't know what I saw. I've had 6 years to think about it, and I still don't know. I don't know if Marcus Devereaux died in that forest, and something took his face and his name and his social security number and walked out of those trees into the world, wearing him like a costume. I don't know if Marcus Devereaux was a real person who existed before January 2018, or if he was always a construction, a template, a practice identity that something built from scratch using a driver's license photo and a trip plan filed at a ranger station and a campsite arranged too perfectly with a dead phone and a half-full water bottle and everything in its proper place. I don't know what's living in that house. I don't know what happens if you knock on the door. What I know is this: The thing in the forest was learning. For years, maybe decades, it was learning. And the protocol existed to monitor its progress. And when its progress was complete, the protocol was removed. The evidence was erased. The system closed around the gap like water closing over a stone. And something walked out of those woods and into a town and bought a house, and now checks its mailbox every morning. It waves to neighbors. It buys groceries. It smiles at cashiers. It learns which questions require laughter and which silences make people uncomfortable. It has a name now. A car, utility bills, a lawn it keeps trimmed, a face no one has any reason to doubt. And sometimes, when I think about Marcus Devereaux standing across the street from me with that perfect face and that wrong, satisfied smile, I understand the worst part. The protocol was never there to stop it. It was there to measure how close it was. And when it finally became close enough, everyone who knew the truth simply stepped aside and let it leave. So if you ever see a man standing too still at the edge of a parking lot, watching people the way a student watches a lesson, don't stare too long. He may smile, and by the time he does, you may already have decided he looks perfectly normal.